Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inside the Newsroom. I'm Maddie Paul. On Inside the Newsroom, we learn about trending stories created from the hearts of not only the KELOLAND area, but also our reporters. And today, we're sharing stories from the Cheyenne River Reservation. It's located in north-central South Dakota. The Cheyenne River Reservation is the fourth largest reservation in the country, and it takes more than an hour to go from one border to another. With so much land, there are plenty of challenges, but there's also a lot of hope. Dan Santella and Lauren Solik recently took a look at this in a KELOLAND series now called Today and Tomorrow on the Cheyenne Reservation. And actually, you can find these stories yourself by heading to KELOLAND.com. Just hover over the news section of our website and find the listed title called Today and Tomorrow on the Cheyenne River Reservation. And once you're there, you'll find the stories and the history of the Cheyenne River Reservation by Dan and Lauren and also all of the people they spoke with. As you can see, it's accompanied by photos, a video player of all their stories in one spot, some history, and again, all the stories right there all together that you can watch. But again, this is enough of me talking, way too much, because Dan and Lauren actually join me at the digital desk now to share their experiences on their trail out west. Now, Dan and Lauren, to start, first of all, thank you for doing this. This is a lot of fun. And I know you have a lot of stories to get to, because how long was this trip? This was about 3 days more?
No, it was one big long day. Well, 1.5, I suppose, a little bit.
Was it actually? I thought you guys were out there forever.
No, yeah, we left early on a Monday morning at like 6 a.m. is when we left Sioux Falls.
Oh, wow.
And then spent like all day in Dupree and Eagle Butte. Stayed the night in Fort Pierre, went back the next day for some video, and then came home to Sioux Falls.
Wow. So have any of you been to the Cheyenne River Reservation before?
No, this was my first time.
I had been in it on the 437 project both years. The route goes through the very southern part of it. So I think actually I ran through a corner of it this year and on the 437 caravan, but barely there, in and out, done. So first substantive trip.
So how does this journey even come together like this? Why you two? Why the Cheyenne River Reservation? Why now?
Sure. Well, so Dan and I have been kind of on a series, I guess, of sorts to go to the reservations. It started a few years ago when both of us and a few other Kelo workers took a trip to Pine Ridge and Rosebud. Back then, it was specifically to focus on missing and murdered Indigenous people, so that trip was a little bit more heavy. But then after that, we just realized, all 9 of the reservations in South Dakota have so many stories that need to be shared, and we don't get out there enough because of the distance from Sioux Falls. So we've just been kind of on a mission to go to them. After that initial trip, Dan and I took another one out to Pine Ridge a year or so later, and then a couple months after that, we went to Crow Creek and Lower Brule. And I guess now the time just kind of came for us to go to Cheyenne River.
It was the next one on the box then.
Yeah.
Check. What about the people that you met while you were out there? Are these connections that you've made just kind of throughout your time at KELOLAND or just specific for this series?
Well, Dan, one of them reached out to you after our last series, right?
Yeah. One reached out via email, sent me a message, on Facebook Messenger when our stories on Lower Brule and Crow Creek were just starting to air. She said, I'd like you to come out to Cheyenne River. That was February 2024. And I knew we knew we wanted to get out to Cheyenne River. We just didn't know when. Mm-hmm. And so when this one started to gain traction and come to fruition, I was like, I got to reach out to Tony. And I did. And we were like, we want to do some stories with you. She was like, absolutely.
Yeah. Otherwise, before that, it's kind of just I like to just keep checking in on what's going on in those towns on the reservation and things every now and again. And we'd come across the Cheyenne River Youth Project and all the work they're doing. That was kind of the initial thing that we both wanted to go out there and check out. And then I learned about the new tiny homes in Dupree and things like that. So everything just kind of started rolling once you're out there.
You kind of figure also, if we're going to be there, try to reach out to the tribal leadership. Mm-hmm. And we did that. Reach out to their office. Laura and I were able to interview Chairman Remy LeBeau as well.
What was the anticipation like on the road driving out west to the reservation?
I think excitement, but also it was 6 a.m., so we were just...
It was very early, okay.
A frequent stop westward is the Caribou Coffee in Mitchell. And it was funny how, like, before the trip, Lauren's like, we're not going to do what we've done before where we just forget to eat.
Yeah, that does
Great.
happen.
Do that.
We're going to avoid that. And we did a moderately good job of that for most of Monday.
Well, we got food at the Caribou in Mitchell, and then the next eat was Taco John's in Eagle Butte at like 9 p.m.
So much so that, like, the lady whom we interviewed, Tony Hamboy with Waukesha Counseling Services, she's like, you haven't eaten since Mitchell, like at 7 a.m.? We're like, no, you know?
Yeah, they tend to be jam-packed days where we're just kind of like going from place to place. And so we just kind of forget about eating. We did have a few snacks like in the car that we pre-packed, but
I love that this is a question about anticipation and it's turning to food because of course it fuels our body, it fuels the mind. But when you guys were going out there and when you do series like these, is there usually a goal in mind that either one of you have? Is it a shared goal? Is it not? Is it a personal goal? Is it a career goal? Did that apply to something like this?
Yeah, I think when we originally started with the missing and murdered Indigenous person stories on Pine Ridge and Rosebud, I think the goal there was just like telling those stories that nobody really hears about. And it initially started because I was looking at like the clearinghouse for missing persons in South Dakota and noticed that so many of them come from the Pine Ridge area. And I just wanted to learn more about that and what's happening in there. And so we wanted to go and hear from the people. And that's just kind of been the trend since, is just going and talking to the people that live there and experience life on the reservation. And so I think that's a goal for me, is just always talking to as many people as we can while we're out there. Oftentimes we don't get enough time as we would. We could spend weeks out on the reservation and come back with so many stories.
Yeah.
But.
By definition of where our newsroom is located, we have a lot of stories that involve the Sioux Falls area.
Yeah.
And there's a number of individuals or groups or organizations whom we hear from more than others, right? A lot of times when we're out on these trips, we're talking to people that don't always have an opportunity to share their stories.
Right.
It's an important endeavor for us to give them an opportunity to share their stories because they need to be told, and that's our job as journalists, to give them a microphone and take down their names and publish stories about them.
Yeah, and I think so often we hear about the bad things that happen on the reservation with crime rates and things like that. But as we saw with our Cheyenne River trip, there are so many good programs out there that are working hard to make life a little better for the people that live there.
Hearing this, like, one thing that comes to my mind is actually the stories that you guys were both able to publish on Monday, and you titled it, Lauren, your package, Sober Living on the Reservation, looking at, two stories. And then Dan, you had an eye on KELOLAND's story that aired that night, and it took elements of Lauren's story, but it really expanded it further. And I just feel like that was a really good day to exemplify, like, those stories that you're talking about that we can share and we can learn from and kind of break stigma from. Was that the goal for, I'm talking about Monday specifically now. We'll go back to the stories that aired on Thursday too, but for Monday, gathering those people and hearing those stories, what was that journey for you two?
Yeah. I mean, when we walked into the counseling center and they were kind of asking us why we were there, what we wanted, we kind of just explained to them that we wanted to hear their stories as much or as little as they wanted to share with us. And it always amazes me when we do these trips how willing people are to just open up their hearts and their lives to us and bare their soul. And that's what the people we talked to there did. And just their journey with finding sobriety was just inspirational. And Tony with the Waukesha Counseling Services helped them get there.
And we sat down first, I think, with Austin Sanchez. He gave a dynamite interview, longer interview. We sat down with Codeine One Skunk. She gave another great interview. And then Tony gave an awesome interview.
Yeah.
And cumulatively, that was maybe literally like an hour of recorded time. And clearly, that merits more than just 1 minute 30 story on the evening news, right? And so it was like, okay, this is more than one story. And it was Lauren's idea, I think, to like, what if we kind of focus on introduce these two people who have these years of sobriety at first, and then the later piece is kind of overall strength of sobriety, this program, what Tony does. And
Yeah, and part of that too came from Austin Sanchez's story because he talked about the boxing club, which I didn't know about was in Eagle Butte. And then he invited us in to come get video, which that could be a whole nother story in and of itself, is just the boxing club. But I mean, that was just such an important piece of his story that I was like, let's just tell people like where Austin and Codeine are right now in their lives and how they got there with their sobriety journey.
And Lauren asked Codeine, she's like, do you have some photos of your family you could share with us? Your kids, you mentioned them a lot in the interview. She's like, they're nearby. They can come over.
Yeah.
We're like, perfect. Of course, with their blessing. And they came and hung out. And that was really great to meet them because, that has been so important for Codeine.
How do you guys decide which stories will air and when? How do you break it up for on air?
Good question.
It usually involves, usually part of the drive home. One of us is driving, the other one's riding shotgun. Person shotgun has a notebook. And then it's like, okay, how are we going to do this?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we sort of just diagram it out, thinking like, and I think it's a lot, to me, it's gut feeling the direction we should go.
Yeah. I think for this trip, it was easy to do like the story in Dupree with the YMCA and the tiny homes first, and then the chairman, just because those were a little bit more condensed of interviews that were easy to get out a little quicker, just 2 days after the trip. And then we knew that with the Walk-Pa Wash Day counseling services interviews and the Cheyenne River Youth Project, we had a big bulk amount of information from those stories that we wanted to take the time to really dive through. And it's these stories we never want to just like push them out too quickly, because then they don't get the time that they deserve for us from our writing and our editing. So we want to take the time to really go through them, listen back to the interviews, and really figure out how they're supposed to be told.
And ending the series with 2 reports about Cheyenne River Youth Project was intentional as well, because that's looking forward. That's the future, the next generations, what they're doing for the future of those kids in that community. So that was intentional to have those 2 pieces at the tail end of the series.
That's so fascinating, because when the whole series started on Thursday, November 13th, one of the first stories that we saw that really kicked off the series was from the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe's chairman. And, he was speaking about the gratitude, the challenges, and then he also mentioned those plans for the future too. So to circle back with what you did on that Tuesday with the youth project, the arts community that was around there too, was pretty special. But I thought that the November 13th stories with the chairman, and then also looking at the tiny homes, set like a really good picture for people who have never been out to the reservation before, have never seen it for their eyes, or kind of understand what goes on at a reservation. Those 2 stories really helped, I feel like, for that type of viewer. Is that always the goal, like really to establish the type of area we're in, or is it to let's just get this content out of what we have?
Yeah. No, I think it is a goal. So many people don't know much about what goes on the reservations, or haven't been out to those areas. And they probably don't realize that how big Cheyenne River Reservation is. We didn't even really fully understand when we were going out there. We looked it up and we're like, oh, it's so large. And so I think just like giving people the ability to have a snapshot and like letting them know like, hey, this land size that we have in our state is all reservation land, and it's basically the size of Connecticut.
Yeah.
And so giving them that snapshot. And then I think the chairman is always usually, or a leader of the tribe is always usually a good starting point for these stories, just because they're the ones that are, they're doing what they can to, lead the reservation and their people.
Yeah. We asked the chairman about some of the topics that we were going to be looking at. We asked him about the tiny homes, asked him about Cheyenne River Youth Project. So those are ways to connect that interview with the other stories too. Yeah, it's a little vignette from our trip about the size of that. We had finished our super long day. We had just inhaled food at Taco John's. Like, all right, time to go back to the hotel. Fort Pierre, hour and a half away.
Yeah.
And so we're like 15, 20 minutes out of Eagle Butte. And I look down at the car dash, and we got less than a quarter tank of gas.
Yeah.
And I'm like, now, don't have cell coverage, because you don't have cell coverage in a lot of rural South Dakota areas. And so we're like, I think we got to go back and feel about before we start the trip.
There's not many stops between Eagle Butte which is just kind of right on the edge of the southern part of the Cheyenne River Reservation, and Fort Pierre, which would be the next largest town.
I don't think there's any gas stations in between.
No,
And so we had to backtrack a pinch, fill up, and then, okay, now we can head back.
Yeah.
I like these types of behind the scenes stories that you never really get to hear about, or we can't hear about in our newscasts. But was there ever a moment of a shortage of content for you two while you were out there?
No.
That seems like a pretty easy answer.
It never is when we go to the reservation trips.
Did you have to cut off a lot of different elements from these stories because there was too much?
I mean, I think like with the Cheyenne River Youth Project, there are so many programs and events that they hold. Like they talked a little bit. One of the stories that we did was kind of just looking at the art scene in Eagle Butte and all the murals that they have up, and that kind of all came from an event that the Cheyenne River Youth Project hosts every year called the Red Can Graffiti Jam, which is like a big event that they do in the town that international artists, I think they said people from New Zealand came last year, and they kind of paint those murals around town. So there's programs and events like that I would love to like go more in depth into and let people know about, and the boxing club and things like that. But it's just, and then like when we're out there usually too, and we start posting on social media, we'll get messages from people like asking us, like I think one person asked us to check out another program that was in town. And I was like, I really wish we could, but we have like 2 hours left here and it's dark.
I do have a list in my notebook of, I think it's titled Next Trip to Cheyenne River, because, you know, people, they reach out on Facebook, they find your number and send you a message. I do think, though, for all the interviews we did and everyone we talked to and all the themes we touched on, I think as best we could, we captured really the overall sense.
Right. Yeah. So much little details that we can go into.
Little snippets.
And, you know, you brought up the element of like social media playing a factor, because I was also one of those people that were watching on social media and seeing, well, what's Lauren and Dan doing now, and seeing the photos that you guys would post. And one of my favorite things to do while looking on social media was looking at the comments too, because a lot of people were reaching out like, oh my gosh, I grew up at the Cheyenne River Reservation. Or they were like, you do need to check out one of these areas over here. Or thank you for sharing these stories. So now that everything is published now and the creation aspect is over and you're starting to hear people talk and react about these stories, what have you heard?
Cody and One Skunk, one of the ladies who has had now years of sobriety, shared really some nice words with us about what it was like talking to us about that. We were previously strangers to her, and that was really nice. And I've heard from my parents as well, who they enjoyed these stories. It's humbling to hear about what people think about the work.
Yeah. I think when people reach out to us and they just like thank us for doing these trips or going to the reservation and telling these stories, because they're not told very often, I think it just reminds me of why I like doing this job. That's kind of the whole point for me, is when I can, you know, give people a little bit of a chance to share their story and let the rest of KELOLAND know, you know, about the people that live in their state that they might not necessarily always know much about or interact with, and things like that. So, and again, it's just always humbling to me when they're so willing to open and bare their souls to us, and then they're just so grateful afterwards. And I'm just like, I'm just here, you know, filming.
And you just gave this astounding interview.
Yeah.
I remember like Tony Hamboy asked me, she was like, text me, she was like, did I do okay in my interview? Like, yeah.
Of course.
Yes, you did.
Of course. I always hear people, when I used to write stories here, they'd always say like, oh, your story was so good and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, no, it was your story.
Right.
You know, it was your story. And I think like this series kind of exemplifies how it could be a little bit of both. Like you are telling the stories of the people that you spoke to and representing them in a great way, giving them a great platform. But you guys also put your hearts into this too. So after everything has been published now and you're able to you're done. You know, you don't have any more stories to put out right now, at least for this series. But looking back on it, what's something as reporters that you think you'll take away from this experience being out at the Cheyenne River Reservation?
I think, you know, I think it's just beautiful what people are doing out on the reservation. Like the Cheyenne River Youth Project, I think is really just going to stick with me because Julie Garrow, the CEO and founder of the Cheyenne River Youth Project, she started it 37 years ago, and she's still so humble about it. She's like, "Yeah, but I had help along the way," and I'm like, "It's turned into this beautiful thing." And I think it's just, I think every trip it's just taking away those stories and just doing my best to share them, and that just makes me happy.
I feel so humbled and grateful that we can do these stories, that we have an opportunity to. You know, Laura and I pitched this idea to our news director, Beth Jensen, just kind of a few short sentences. And Beth was like, yeah, go, which is really great to have that trust and to be able to highlight these voices like Julie Garrow, like Tony Handboy and the others. It's just so wonderful. I feel just grateful.
Well, congratulations on publishing your series. Everybody can still watch it if they go to KELOLAND.com and look for the section that says today and tomorrow on the Cheyenne River Reservation. And we're actually out of time, guys.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we did it. We hit the mark pretty well. So that will be it for Inside the Newsroom. Lauren, Dan, thank you so much for being here and sharing your amazing story and amazing journey out west. I can't wait for the next series to come out. And everybody, until next time, have a great day. Bye.